As the rich aroma of pumpkin, nutmeg, and cinnamon filled the air, I leaned against the kitchen counter and took a long inhale. In the kitchen light, the pie's golden brown crust shimmered slightly as I placed them on the cooling rack, experiencing a strange sense of fulfillment for each perfect pie. Thanksgiving was a labor of love for me, not only because I enjoyed cooking, but also because it was one of the few occasions when life was meant to slow down. Families would gather around the table to share warmth, tales, and laughter. This year was particularly noteworthy because it was my first Thanksgiving in charge. I had spent weeks mentally preparing, going over every detail. The turkey was already brined and soaked in a subtle herb combination, ready to be roasted to perfection. Mashed potatoes, seasoned with salt and citrus, were prepared using my grandmother's renowned recipe. This wasn't simply a meal, it was a statement. Everything had to be flawless, a declaration that I could do this, that I belonged. Here. You see, I had assumed a role when I married Rachel 2 years ago, a role with implicit expectations. Rachel had been married before. She and her former husband, Marcus, had built a life, a son, customs, and a history. I had always known I would live in the shadow of that past, but I didn't mind. I liked Rachel. I liked Nathan, the boy who had gradually begun to feel like mine. I had tried my best to show him that I was here to stay, to be a consistent presence in their lives, not just some stepfather trying to fit in. This Thanksgiving was significant. It was my turn to host, my chance to bring Rachel's side of the Mao family together in our house, making it a part of the tradition. As I heard footsteps in the living room, I looked up to see Nathan rearranging the place cards on the dining room table. A smirk pulled at his lips as he switched seats. Interfering with my meticulously organized seating plan, are we? He looked up and shrugged. I smiled, but something in me shifted when I saw his expression. Rachel had a full life before me. That thought still struck differently, not out of jealousy, but because sometimes it felt like her past hovered in the background, just out of my grasp. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over, ruffling Nathan's hair as I glanced at the table. Do you think Aunt Liz actually wants to sit next to Uncle Henry after last year's political dispute? Nathan sneered. Maybe that's why I put them together. I chuckled, shaking my head, stepping back to admire our work. The table was perfect, candles flickering softly, cutlery gleaming, the kind of table you'd see in a Thanksgiving ad. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything truly was perfect. Then my phone buzzed. Rachel's name lit up the screen. Balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder, I answered, "Hey, honey, you're on your way?" A long pause. Too long. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Something came up at work," she finally said. I froze. My fingers tightened around the napkin I had been adjusting. "I know," she sighed, "but I have to attend this urgent meeting." Rachel worked in marketing. Sure, she got client calls sometimes, but not on Thanksgiving. I forced a smile into my voice. "But, I mean, everyone's here. I've prepared everything. I know this is a big deal." She sighed. "I know, I'm so sorry, but it's important. I'll try to make it for dessert." My jaw clenched. I wasn't the kind of husband to get upset over little things, but something about the way she spoke. Like she had already made up her mind. "Fine," I said quietly, swallowing down the frustration. "I love you," she added. I hesitated. Then, finally, "Don't be too late." Nathan was watching me from the table, his face unreadable. "Everything okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Yeah." He didn't look convinced. Something in his eyes darted away too quickly, like he knew something I didn't. I turned back to the table. The candlelight flickered just the same. But for the first time that evening, something about it felt off. Thanksgiving would not be the picture-perfect occasion I had hoped for. The excitement, the warmth, it all shifted, like a cold draft, slipping through a window crack I hadn't noticed before. I had spent weeks preparing, hunting down the perfect name cards, carefully folding each napkin, setting the cutlery, the centerpiece. And now, it all felt pointless. I wasn't an insecure man. I never had been. But something about Rachel's tone gnawed at me. Was I overthinking, or had I just finally started paying attention? The doorbell rang. I let out a slow breath before answering. James, my best friend, stood there holding a six-pack in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "You might need reinforcements," he joked. I chuckled, leading him inside. "Figured you'd be drowning in in-laws by now," he added. I forced another laugh, but my chest still felt tight. James set the drinks down, then frowned. "Rachel called. She's working late." I nodded. His eyebrows lifted slightly. He said nothing at first, just slowly looked around. The pies, the turkey brining in the fridge, the perfectly prepared sides. Then, shaking his head, he muttered, "And she just left?" Something in his tone made me pause. "James?" He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I wasn't going to say anything, but he hesitated. I narrowed my eyes. "But what?" He swirled the wine in his glass, glanced up at me. "I saw Rachel yesterday," he finally said. I blinked. "Okay." "At a boutique." He hesitated. "She was buying a watch." "All right." I frowned. Not just any watch. A high-end one, with an engraving. My stomach twisted. "Cool." I forced a laugh. "Lucky husband, I guess?" James didn't smile. She said it was a surprise, but he hesitated again. "She got weird when I mentioned it." I exhaled, shaking my head. "You're overanalyzing." James pulled out his phone, swiping through his camera roll. Then he flipped the screen around. My heart stopped. A receipt, time-stamped yesterday, engraving on the back. "Forever yours, M. M. Marcus." Not Andrew. My throat went dry. I looked toward the living room. Nathan sat at the table staring at his phone, not playing with the name cards anymore, just watching. He knew. I turned my phone slowly toward him. "Do you know anything about this?" Nathan's gaze flickered. To the TV. That one. Tiny flicker. And I knew. I stiffened. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Nathan swallowed. "What's going on?" he murmured. I exhaled slowly, gripping the counter. Thanksgiving was ruined. And maybe so was my marriage. I took out my phone, launched my banking app, and turned the screen toward Marcus. He narrowed his eyes and questioned me, his voice steady. His name was on a direct deposit. My eyes went wide. "Cool. Guess who's been paying my mortgage?" Marcus balled his fists and slowly turned to Rachel. "You told me you were struggling, that you could barely make ends meet." Rachel winced, but I continued. "My money, my income, my hard-earned salary was being used by Sheck in our joint account." Rachel's father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "To pay for your damn house?" He turned to Rachel sharply. "Is this true?" Rachel opened her mouth but closed it just as quickly. Nathan stood abruptly. "So we had to lie to him, right? Keep your secret because you didn't want him to know?" His voice was quiet, but full of anger. Rachel's eyes met his. "It's not like that, sweetie." The room fell silent. Nathan glanced at me, conflicted. "I don't know. I thought maybe it didn't matter, so I didn't say anything. I didn't want to destroy everything." I swallowed hard. "But I was wrong. You should know." Rachel's eyes shot toward me in desperation. "Andrew, please, we can talk about this. Fix it." I chuckled. "Rachel, there's no fixing this." I reached into my pocket and placed my wedding ring on the table. She gasped as if I had struck her. "Think of this as my last gift to you." "Congratulations." "You don't mean that." I motioned toward her. You're free to live the life you clearly wanted. Her breath hitched. Oh, I do. Marcus chuckled bitterly. Well, this has been an incredible show. Rachel turned to him. Marcus, please, he scoffed. You lied to me, too. You didn't care about me. Rachel's face twisted in frustration. I was trying to do what's best for everyone, Marcus sneered. Or just yourself? You don't have the right to judge me, she yelled. None of you. It's not like I had some evil plan to hurt anyone. I was just trying to... Marcus shook his head and ran a hand down his face. Can't believe this. I took a deep breath. You don't have to, Rachel. You just have to live with it. For the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. I turned to Nathan. You have a choice. Nathan hesitated. Rachel reached for him. I'm coming with you, he said, stepping away from her. I nodded and walked to the door. Nathan followed. James gave Rachel a mocking wave. Happy Thanksgiving. Elliot, ever professional, just gave me a nod of respect. Rachel remained frozen. As I stepped outside, Marcus muttered, Well, there goes dinner. I smiled. Mission accomplished. James patted my back. Damn, that was beautiful. I glanced at Nathan. You okay? He nodded, pausing. Thank you. Rachel had made her choice. Nathan had made his. As I drove away, the crisp night air filled my lungs. Thanksgiving was meant to be about family, and for the first time, I truly understood who mine was. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, arms folded, staring out the window. I didn't push him to talk. He had just watched his mother's carefully constructed reality crumble. Years of deceit, finally exposed. I was still reveling in that thought when we pulled into the driveway. But as I put the car in park, Nathan didn't unbuckle. He glanced at me. Are you okay? He caught me off guard. I gripped the steering wheel, exhaling. Shouldn't I be asking you that? Nathan nodded but made no move to leave. Instead, he hesitated, staring at the dashboard. I don't know what happens next. For the first time, he sounded uncertain, not the usual teenager who brushed everything off with sarcasm. I sighed. Me neither, but we'll figure it out, together. Nathan nodded. I don't want to go back. I looked at him seriously. Then, you don't have to. Rachel made her choice. I put a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's go home. Inside, the smell of Thanksgiving dinner still lingered. The turkey, the pies, the mashed potatoes, left untouched. James walked in behind us, picked up a fork, and dug into the stuffing. Well, that was the best live-action soap opera I've ever seen. Nathan cracked a small smile. You're really just going to eat? James shrugged. Hell yeah. I didn't get to eat at dinner. Nathan hesitated, then grabbed a plate and loaded it up. I watched for a moment, then did the same. Just because one of us had turned on the family didn't mean the rest of us had to let her ruin the night. Rachel's name lit up my phone. Call after call. Then the texts started. Andrew, please pick up. We need to talk. I can explain everything. Where's Nathan? I rolled my eyes and put my phone down. James smirked. She's in full damage control mode. Nathan's fork paused midair. Are you going to answer her? I shook my head. Not tonight. Nathan didn't argue. He didn't want to talk to her either. James stretched. I've had enough. Family drama for one night. He patted my back before turning to Nathan. You gonna be okay, kid? Nathan nodded. Yeah. James smirked. Good. You're doing fine. He grabbed another piece of pie and whistled as he walked out the door. Nathan got up. I'm going to bed. All right? I nodded. He hesitated. Thanks. If you need anything, I know. Then quietly, he stepped forward and hugged me. Not long, not dramatic, just real. I patted his back. Go to bed, son. He nodded and disappeared down the hallway. I sat there for a while, finishing my drink. For years, I had lived in Rachel's version of reality. But now, I was free. And best of all, this was just the beginning. Rachel still had one more lesson to learn. Actions have consequences.